Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth episode of the DeepBrief podcast. My name is Kutalani Kumalo. I am your host, and I am so excited to be able to come back to you again and bring you another episode of thought-provoking, insightful conversation around this industry that we work in, that we are seeking to leave better than we found it. I want to start off this episode by offering a word of gratitude and thanks to everybody who has tuned in, who's watched the episodes up to this point, for every comment, for every DM or message that gives encouragement and support. We really appreciate that. I personally appreciate that as you're building something and kind of taking it out of the corners of your mind and making it something tangible and solid. It's really, really helpful and encouraging and heartwarming to be able to get feedback and support. So I really want to give a shout out to everybody who's, shared the links, offered criticism and insights. This makes us continue to sharpen our skills, if I can call it that, and make this platform more real, more accessible, and more available to you. So thank you so very much for that. As we get started in our fourth episode, what I want to bring to us today is a conversation around the world of branding and how we interact with brands. I'm sitting here with Linda Appie, who is a marketing and brand director. Linda has a wealth of experience across a variety of different sectors. We met while you were at Coca-Cola South Africa, early 2010s, if I can call it that, 2011, 2012.
Yeah.
From there, you spent some time with the Time Bank in the fintech space, and also beyond that at Old Mutual. It really is a pleasure to have you in studio.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
I'm excited to have you here with me today because I think the work that you have done, and not only with the Valpre in the FMCG space, but also in the fintech space and financial services in the other positions that you've carried, beyond that, it really has been about brand stewardship. So what I want the conversation to be able to kind of unfold and get to is to just dig a little bit deeper, the way we do here on DeepBrief, about the brands that we work with, the brands that we interact with, and how we engage with them and how we connect with them. I think even beyond that, I want to acknowledge that you're also building your own brand in the podcast that is Mind Her Biz. So I wanted to offer a shout out to the platform, but also to encourage you, once you've done with this episode, to go and have a look. We'll put the link in the info section so that people can understand the work that you are doing with Mind Her Biz and inspiring a community of female entrepreneurs. I think even as we start the conversation, before we get into the branding, I'd like to give an ode or an opportunity for you to give us a little bit of insight into Mind Her Biz, just so that we can understand that space and the work that you're doing there, and then we can dig deep into the branding conversation.
Okay. Thank you so much, KK, for having me today. I think I get to see, what it's like to when the guests are having to prepare for a podcast.
Yes.
So thanks for that. And also a big congratulations to you.
Thank you.
For the courage to be able to start, a platform such as this. It's like giving birth. Yeah. And all the best.
Thank you.
So just in terms of minding her business, so where that came from, it was actually born out of a passion project that I had. So in my most recent role in corporate, I was actually looking after sales and marketing for Old Mutual SME Corporate's fintech platform. And it was a B2B platform called SME Go. And the way the platform was positioned was in two ways. Number one, as a platform in which businesses could manage their admin and other financial requirements in such a way that they could then bring professionalism and put, a sense of having all the right documentation in one place from a compliance perspective. And in that way, they could then be funding ready. On the second side, the platform was around being a funding concierge. So we had funders behind the scenes, and SMEs would use that platform to apply for funding. So for me, seeing both sides of that coin, because it was my job to sell, but also market it, meant that I had to go around the country, form links with SME organizations, meet SMEs, have conversations. Because I'm a very strong believer in you can't sell something if you can't walk the streets, talk the talk to the people who are using the product, understand their pain points. And coming out of that, I was getting a lot of feedback and insights around what entrepreneurs were really, really going through. And I would say to you that some of it for me was heartbreaking, because some of the SMEs would follow us around in terms of the different events or interventions that we did. And for me, I've always been a strong advocate of women in the workplace, but women also outside of the workplace, women as entrepreneurs. So I then felt the need to start a group of female entrepreneurs, and it was a space where I felt we could share conversations, experiences, and advice around what really happens when you're starting your own baby or you're starting your business. And I feel that a lot of the things that female entrepreneurs go through, or entrepreneurs in general go through, it doesn't necessarily have to be as hard as it is if only we were open to sharing. Because there's also this very strong scarcity mentality around sharing. Everyone's protecting themselves or protecting their zone. So it started off as a WhatsApp group. It then grew into once a quarter events that we would then host. But I still felt like we were not meeting often enough, or we didn't really know each other, even within the WhatsApp group, because there'll be people who join, some people leave, etc. So some people haven't necessarily seen each other in person, but yet there's a story, there's knowledge that that person could have. So I wanted to bring those stories to life. And when we started the group, the podcast wasn't necessarily in the vision. And as time grew, I felt like, okay, but there's an opportunity here to give the founders or the ladies visibility for their businesses, but also for them to tell their stories and share their stories. And so that's how the podcast then came about. So we've been fortunate enough to have had a good reception. And so far, we're really looking at it as a longer term journey. And what's really at the forefront of it is authentic founder stories, but also it's not just for founders, but also for entrepreneurial women, because you can be in the workplace and still be entrepreneurially minded. And also, when we look at what's happening right now, we are all having to look at careers in terms of a portfolio approach. You're not just doing one thing. Your corporate job can be one of other things that you are doing. So that's where that comes from.
That sounds really exciting. There's a couple of things that you said there that I'd want to unpack a little bit. Firstly, that concept of being an intrapreneur, within the organization that you're already with, you're already in. And I think you setting up this group, this space of being able to bring women together and kind of harness resources, information, knowledge sharing, and build up on energy, because there are times on the journey in entrepreneurship where one might feel isolated and alone, and like the things that you're doing aren't, they aren't impacting or making the kind of difference and impact that you're hoping they would. So I feel like you setting up that group was you in your own personal right, living that entrepreneurial spirit and bringing that to life. But I think deeper than that is the fact that we have this head and heart dynamic where we are intellectual, and in our professional spaces, we are hired because of our intellectual capacity combined with our capabilities and energies and skills and all of that. But sometimes, particularly as women in leadership, we stay at the intellectual and we don't come down to the heart. and the heart says, I can see that there's a need. I can see that women are need this community, need to gather, need to inspire each other and work together in order to fulfill their individual needs. Where did the courage or the maybe even the word audacity come from that says, I'm making a decision based on my heart because I believe this is the right thing to do?
I think it probably came from my own training, I would say, within the marketing space. So, sometimes as very young or entry level marketing or brand managers, you always want to work on the big brands, right? And for me, for a long time, I didn't necessarily work on big brands. And it becomes a bit of, oh, but I want that visibility, you're like, oh, I've got a plan. 2 years, I want to do this.
Yes.
3 years, 10 years, I want to make sure I'm at this level. And I now look at it as a blessing. So I know, in terms of when we met, when I was at Coca-Cola, and at that time, I joined the company working on smaller brands. And then as time passed, they then moved me on to what would seem perhaps from the outside as a big brand, but within the company, not necessarily
the biggest or flagship brand.
Yes. Exactly, because everyone wanted to work on brand Coke, and then the rest of us, we had to deal, with the roles that we had been allocated. But I think what I'm grateful for from those experiences is that team, and we were called the Still Beverages team. And these were all the healthier beverages. So your sports drinks, your juices,
Yes.
Your iced teas, your bottled water. We didn't necessarily as a team have big budgets, but what we had, I think, was we were being taught or trained in, being agile, thinking out of the box, and what you just called now in intrapreneurial thinking. And that then makes you less reliant on necessarily having to have a big budget or big assets to be able to push forward. And you are then, it's then allowing you to build within yourself a spirit of resilience, but also what I guess I now recognize as audacity. And you have to find other ways to push your brand ahead or to think out of the box. So I think there's that. And then also at the same time, based on what I was now seeing within my role at Old Mutual, and before that, I had, joined Time Bank.
Yes.
And one of the things I remember when the recruiters called me, they were saying that they were actually looking for marketers who had classical marketing experience. But I also think at the same time, because it was a challenger brand, they knew that they didn't necessarily have the big budgets of what the other banks would have. So that then helped me, because then my skill set or my experience that I'd had wouldn't have allowed me entry into that role. And then now once I'd been inside, then now it's a founder-led organization. It's a purpose-led organization. And also at the same time, every day, every month, you're living what the company, not just the brand, is having to do to survive, to make an impact, to get ahead. So again, now it was like, okay, this is entrepreneurship 101, but in practice, but at a bigger scale. And then even that then made me an attractive candidate for Old Mutual to then say, hey, actually, you've been exposed to this.
Yes.
Come help us on this side. So it's almost, for me, it's felt like it's been a building block. And then I, as an individual, because I believe that I've been able to progress to where I've been through the help of others, from my first role to the various roles that I've had, it's people taking a chance on you, whether it's that manager who has the patience to coach you, or to put that extra time in you, etc. So for me personally, I've always been passionate about giving back. So that's something I've consistently done throughout my career in terms of coaching people that I work with, but also people I don't work directly with, or even outside of the organization. And then I think now with minding her business, it started off as a passion project. This is what I'd like to do. I'm a believer in we need to give back, because I feel like there's that yin and yang effect in terms of the universe. And for me, it was, let me do my bit. It might be small, and I really do think it also had to do with I was now discovering this for myself, within myself, that actually, in as much as I've been a corporate citizen, actually, wait a minute, let me try and step out of this and see what I can do as a side hustle, but also as an entrepreneur. And you're very right when you say that that in itself is lonely. In as much as it's brave, there's a lot of moments where you have to, push yourself forward. And I do really believe, for me, that it's created a sense of, community, because I'm with like-minded people. And the ladies themselves have said that to me, that, you've created a space for us to be able to have these conversations. And I think also for me, what bothered me for a long time is, and it's good, representation matters, right? However, I feel that a lot of the time when we see stories of entrepreneurship, they are inspiring, yes, but we don't necessarily get to understand what happened before the business became a multi-million rand success. Because, before it had many franchises, before it had many stores, those day-to-day things, did that founder, did they get an overdraft? Did they have perhaps imposter syndrome? Did they have courage or shame around asking family members for help? Could they be honest around, and it happens, where you're at a social event and people are asking you, what do you do? Because that's the question, right? And sometimes you have that thing within yourself where you're like, unless I've hit a certain milestone, I don't have permission to call myself,
There you go.
An entrepreneur or a podcast or whatever it is that you're doing. And for me, I feel that we need to tell more of those stories. And when we tell more of those stories, we give people permission to move forward and to take those courageous steps. Because unless you see other people haven't been in that experience, then you feel like you're alone. And it's not good to keep that, within yourself.
Sure. I think that that space or that energy that says, how do we reflect other people to themselves through, whether it's through the podcast space, through the groups, or through the work that we do. I think that's at the core of what we are doing here at DeepBrief, that if you can see somebody that you can relate to, with whose story resonates with you, that can inspire you to do what they have done and elevate. Because I think that elevation is what allows the industry to grow, what allows opportunities to kind of unfold. And in that space, if we can look at the topic that we're discussing today, where I'd like us to create a space to elevate the conversation around the brands that we represent, the brands that we work for. How do we bring that element of trust so that people choose and remember the brands? I think if you ask anybody about a brand or what is branding, one of the first things that might pop to mind is big, bold, bright advertising, billboards. That's kind of what has been ingrained in people about branding. But I feel like there's so much more. There are way more ingredients that make a brand resonate with people. If you think of a scenario of, and I remember as a teenager reading a book, I must have taken a book out of the library about advertising. And one of the things that was in this kind of advertising 101 was that the consumer's decision to buy a particular brand happens before they leave the house. It doesn't happen in the aisle when they're actually shopping. So all of these shelf talkers and bright this and, all of the activations that might happen within the actual store itself, yes, they do make an impact, but most of the time when you're writing the list, you've already decided, I'm going to buy, we don't say I'm buying dishwasher. We say I'm buying Sunlight dishwasher. Not even dishwasher, I'm buying Sunlight. I'm not going to buy margarine, I'm buying Rama. So we already have this brand locked in our minds because either that's what and if I look at my family, we grew up in the same house, and the soap that we all used was Lux. So I'm sure if I went into each of my siblings' homes, there'd be Lux in the bathrooms just because that's what we used growing up, right? So it's those kind of decisions that would make us loyal and trusting of a particular brand. So what goes into the work as a brand manager, as a brand custodian? And you were speaking earlier, and I quickly jotted down that work that you were talking about going around the country with Old Mutual, it was almost brand evangelism, right? So when you are this brand evangelist and this brand steward, what goes into creating a brand that resonates and a brand that people trust?
So it's a couple of things, right? So number one, it has to do with really, in as much as you're the brand steward or the brand custodian, you are also the custodian of the customer or consumer's interest in that brand. And your main stakeholder, besides the company that obviously has a mission to make money, you actually have your main stakeholder as the consumer or the customer, because unless the consumer or customer is happy, then there's no sales, right? And your main job is to get consumers interested in the product. So that's the awareness job. Get them exposed to it, get them to try the product, which is the trial part in terms of the funnel, or rather the brand pyramid, and then get them, into then using the brand and over time earning their loyalty, so that, they can, buy your product repeatedly. So that in itself then begs for you to put yourself in the consumer's shoes. So we spend a lot of time understanding the consumer. So who are they? Where do they live? What other products do they consume besides our product? Even the ones who are not consuming our product, why are they consuming those other products, and why haven't they chosen our product? And then the ones who do consume our product, why do they do that? And it goes a lot into the stuff that we learn when we are in the brand marketing courses or school, where a lot of it has to do with consumer behavior theory or psychology, which is the psychology of decision making, and exactly what you were talking about in terms of the different influences and the motivators. And again, it either goes back to childhood exposure, your Lux example, or certain needs that we have as individuals, or different factors that are influencing our lives at the time. So sometimes we'll choose brands because that's what we've been exposed to. We therefore trust that because in some subconscious way, it's got, childhood links. And I guess that links very nicely to what's happening right now with the Vaseline campaign as well. Yeah. Or it, you could find yourself in a position where you don't necessarily have access to your regular brand, and maybe that point of purchase, item or message actually pushed you to try something new, or maybe your regular product wasn't available and you decided to try something else. So there's a lot of deep work that goes into that. In terms of the data around the consumer, their behavior, their lifestyle, their decision-making methodology, but also in terms of their consumption patterns as well. And I remember Coke invested quite a bit of money in what was called the consumer beverage landscape. And they, for each of the categories or the brands, we had that type of information. And then, yes, that was that type of data, but we also had a responsibility to then go into qualitative research where you're sitting or observing, consumers from a focus group perspective in terms of the research, and you're listening to them talk about the brands. And I know, some companies would even go as far as having consumer immersions where you're actually in the home of the customer, the consumer, and you're observing them. And sometimes what comes out in terms of how you move the brand forward or how you position it or even land on that campaign or consumer insight, not all of it is always obvious. A lot of it is coming from those insights that behind the scenes work, because what you're needing to do is, number one, sort of have an intersection of what does the brand or product that you're selling, what are its functional benefits? So, my brand can do this, this, and that. This is what it can deliver functionally. And normally that's enough to get people to be aware of your brand and to try it. However, for the long-term pieces, and this is where the money is made by the company or the brand, what you then need to add on to that or layer onto that is an emotional reason for people to buy into your brand. And you normally get that from the consumer behavior piece, because it's almost like you're creating an emotional reason and an unconscious reason, because normally consumers wouldn't necessarily say it to you that obviously, but you're creating another layer for getting people to buy into and use the product. And your job as the brand custodian is to be able to harness those insights and actually be able to work with your internal stakeholders and partners to be able to deliver that in a way that then speaks to the consumer. Because in as much as in advertising, we can show how the product is used,
Yes.
that works, but only for so long. What we then need to do is then we need to add the emotional layer to get our consumers to then connect with us and then, stay the course and be loyal customers. Because what you need is actually repeat usage of the product. And that's what gets you the long-term loyalty. And what's even best is if you can then turn those loyal users into advocates as well.
I think when you believe in a brand, you defend it and you'll recommend it, and you'll do a lot of that hard kind of slog work that says you should try this. This helps here. This is the best solution for this. And I think that's what carries, or turns the consumer into an advocate, as you're saying. So as a brand manager or, custodian, steward, evangelist, however we want to describe it, there has to be a point where you become a serious believer in the product. Can you be successful as a brand manager if you haven't bought into the brand itself?
Yes and no. It really depends. It really depends.
Okay.
I think there's people who perhaps approach it as okay, this is a job. I'm here to do what I need to do. It's a 9 to 5. And they're able to separate the two worlds. And there's people who are able to do that successfully. For me personally, there have been brands that I've worked on where initially I wasn't necessarily understanding the product nor the target market, or the rationale for people wanting to buy into the brand. But because that's how I've been trained in terms of doing the deep work behind understanding that type of psychology. So then for me, it's helped me to then buy into the brand, because I always approach it as a challenge. That, okay, I'm on this brand. Let's say I'm on brand X. We're selling solar panels. I then make it my mission in my first 6 months to come to the groups in terms of why are people wanting to buy this. There's also, that deep work you do in terms of understanding the market, what's happening in the market, who's growing, who isn't growing. Perhaps there's economic or macro factors that are affecting that market as well. And then for me, that then gets me invested and in buying into whatever it is that I've been tasked with doing. Because I also think there sometimes is that perception that what we're doing is the flashy bit, which is the marketing, the advertising, when actually there's so much work. Because if you think or think about everything that I've spoken about thus far, a lot of it is more thinking work, it's strategic work, it's research work, and therefore it can be the unsexy work, because it's not necessarily the stuff that people see once you present the final product. There's also a lot of work that goes into collaborating with the internal teams. So it can be your regulatory teams who can tell you what you can or can't say, or claim or can't claim about the product, because obviously there's regulations that need to be respected and adhered to. And then also there's your manufacturing teams. And for me, I've always felt that those are the unsung heroes. Those are the guys who, some of them have worked in those factories or behind the scenes for more than 20 years. They've seen products come and go. They've seen innovations come and go. You'll come and say, guys, let's launch a solar panel, I don't know, that can have pink and red neon lights according to the time of day. They'll be able to tell you whether it can or can't happen, how what the impact is from a cost point of view, and therefore from a profitability point of view. Do we have even the capacity to produce it within the manufacturing lines that we have? And also lessons that they've learned from past experiences of having to try and do such a product. Because sometimes, being the creative kids in the company, you come with your bright ideas. You're like, oh, I've got this great idea. And then they can say to you, actually, we tried that. However, this is what we learned. It's not necessarily to discourage you, but it's for you to say, okay, great. However, did we try it in this way? And since we saw that didn't work, let's perhaps not waste that money again, because that's also a data point, right? Now that we've learned what we learned from that experience, how can we approach it in this way?
In a different way.
Yes, yeah. So there's that. And then there's also that project management experience that you gain, because a lot of the work also has to do with, number one, motivating people around the brand to say, okay, I've done this work. This is where I think we should go. This is what I've picked up. I therefore think from a manufacturing or innovation point of view, we need to do this. From a communications point of view, we need to do that. From an advertising point of view, we need to do this and you need to do that. So you're constantly having to be managing different stakeholders, but you're also rallying them around this common vision or goal. Sometimes you are an administrator, you're setting up the meetings. Sometimes you're a strategist, you're putting together those documents, whether it's a brief to the agency, whether it's that innovation document, or even the commercial business case for whatever it is that you want to do. Sometimes you are in the hot seat. You're having to justify the brand's performance or the numbers to management. Sometimes you're a writer, because there's board packs. There's steer codes and committees that need to be presented to, and sometimes you are the face of the brand, wherever it needs to be. And I always used to say, whenever people ask me, but you're such an introvert, how did you succeed in marketing? And I'm like, actually, there's no way to hide, because in a room full of executives, anytime there's a question that's being asked about your brand, depending on what the issue is, of course, the heads are turning and they're looking at you. So you actually have, to speak up, and you need to answer those questions. So for me, it's been quite an experience in that you're learning different skill sets. And like I said, those are sometimes the things that are not seen in the front, because that's all the stuff that happens behind the scenes before we get the approval to launch that new product, before it hits the shelves, or before we actually put the TV or radio ad together, because that's actually in the end stages when we're now executing.
When you are doing all of this, and as you say, there's no place that you can hide, because you must have the answers about the brand, and its positioning. As an individual, as a marketer, as a brand manager, do you ever switch off? And by that I mean, if it's the weekend and I'm sitting with my friends and family and I'm the brand manager for one of the still beverages, whether it's Valpre or Bonaqua, do you check yourself before you pick up a bottle of another brand, because that's what happens to be there? Do you always take your brand with you? Do you live your brand 24 hours a day? Or is there a time where you say, I'm knocking off and I'm just me, introvert me, I'm chilling and I'm not interacting with that brand that I am the evangelist and steward of?
I think it depends on the category, but most of the time, KK, not really.
Okay.
You're not necessarily switching off, because for me, I always felt like every interaction, every observation was a data point. And the reason for that is that sometimes you'd sit in meetings and you're putting a certain idea across, and then someone will say, oh no, but my daughter is using this, this and that, and my daughter's experience is like this. And you have to be arming yourself with these data points. Also, it's your opportunity to give feedback to the other players in the ecosystem. So you'll be in the store, right? Let's say, like I was at that time, the custodian for Bonaqua and Valpre. You're in the store. You've been chatting to the trade marketing team. We've both jointly agreed, or the shopper marketing team, sorry, we've jointly agreed on what are the merchandising standards for that brand. So how will that product be placed on the shelf? At which part of the shelf? Which shelf? Is it at the bottom? Is it in the middle? Is it at the eye level, etc.? So a lot of the time, in as much as we used to have trade visits, and which is when we would go out into the stores, not as consumers now, we're on an official duty,
Yes.
It's a team of people, cross-functional team, and we're going around the different stores. So sometimes you're there shopping on a weekend and you can see that, okay, the agreement was to have Valpre sitting at this place, or at the till point, or it's a gondola end, and you're at, I don't know, whichever Pick and Pay or ShopRite or whichever, and you can actually tell, okay, it's not necessarily coming through. And the reason why sometimes you can't let it go is because every time a consumer is interacting with your product, it's a moment of truth. That's a lost sale. You're being measured on volume, value, or revenue, and your KPIs. So you are thinking, okay, let me get in touch with whoever, or let me take a quick picture so that I can give feedback. And then sometimes you are seeing excellent execution, and therefore you can then give feedback to the sales team or the execution team and say, guys, I actually was in the store, I saw that, and this was really great. When I was working in the services industry, that switching off was almost impossible, especially in banking, because people's money.
Yeah,
that's
never switch off from that.
Yes. And then also banks have they have a duty to protect people's money, but also to make sure that people can access their money. So I actually spent a few years where, whether it was New Year's Eve, Christmas Eve, the 15th of December, think of those days where most people are most likely to be swiping and shopping and all of that. So, the first year I went through it, I was also learning. And then over the years, I then learned to prepare, in terms of collaborating with the different teams. And also, I think what's happened with marketing in past years, a marketer's performance was almost private, right? People wouldn't necessarily know, unless they were working in that industry or category, how that brand's doing. Now, with social media and digital marketing, especially with that type of services industry, that's immediate. If people are not able to access their money, or if something's not going well with a specific product in the FMCG space, if it's, I don't know, seen to be of poor quality and things like that, people can just go onto social media and complain. Your brand is trending. You are judged by how fast you are responding to the crisis. What did you say? Like I said, how quickly did you say it? Also, are you factual? Did you resolve the issue? And consumers have also become smarter. They also know that, okay, brands care about their reputations. So if I've been talking to you privately and you're not giving me the feedback that I want, I'm going to expose you. And I know you're going to be on it because you also don't want to train for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
So therefore now it then becomes that matter of also always doing that social monitoring in terms of the channels, but also making sure that you are training your team, putting the right resources in those positions, but also training them and agreeing within the company cross-functionally around the different crisis scenarios. If this happens, how are we going to respond? What's our response time? How quickly should we do it? Whose approval do we need? What are the types of instances where we'll just go without, necessarily getting, everybody's approvals? Because sometimes you need to move. And that's also that other thing. You need to be flexible and agile. So I think right now there's a lot more that's demanded from the modern marketer versus when we started out in the earlier days. Because before it was around the traditional channels, and now there's digital marketing, there's social media, there's so many more channels and data points in which consumers or customers are giving you feedback, and your job is to make sure that you are being responsive and you are protecting, yes, the brand's reputation, but also that you are protecting the interests of your consumers or customers as well.
Okay. There's an expression in the space that is about brand personality or the brand voice. If a brand were to be put on your portfolio, for example, you've inherited a brand, how do you begin to understand its personality and its voice? Or how do you define that brand personality and that brand voice?
I think it's a few things. A lot of the time, if the brand's already been in existence, a lot of that stuff has probably been predefined by a previous brand team. And there's also an expression where they always make jokes about us marketers, and they say, you can always tell when there's a new marketing person. They want to change the packaging, they want to change this, they want to put their own stamp.
Yeah.
And I think you don't always have to do that. Sometimes you inherit brands where the previous brand team actually did a very sound and tight job,
Yes.
of actually refining that and honing that. And they would have done that based on, what the brand or product can do functionally. But also they would have done the work in terms of, the target market segment, defining that. Who are they targeting? Who are these people? What do they look like? Where do they live? What are their interests? What are the types of things they do? And then also, when you're looking at why people are using that product or service, what's important always in marketing is positioning and differentiation, because you don't want to show up like another brand. You want to create a reason for people to choose or buy your brand versus other brands. And when you put the functional reasons or the functional competencies or characteristics of a product or brand versus what I spoke about earlier, which is the emotional reason. Because what you're going into with the research is customers don't also always understand their needs or their motivations. So then you go into that and you sort of find the sweet spot around, here's my product, here's what it can deliver, here's the needs that my product is going to address, but also at the same time, here's this emotional hook or insight that we can actually hang on to to sort of, present that to the consumer or the customer as actually this product can solve this for you. And then as you are going around that, you obviously then start putting together the different, areas around the brand. And then whether we like it or not, at the end of the day, brands can also be seen as people, right? And when you are then taking this and you're working with your creative partners and you're saying, guys, I need a logo. This is what I'm trying to do. This is what we're trying to do with this brand. These are the needs. And then the guys are then taking that and they've been trained in terms of colors, logos, whatever it is visually, that can then bring that to life. And then within that, it's almost like, you're creating sort of like a person, even though it's a brand. And when you talk to consumers and in the early stages of creating a brand, now that you've put this together and you've put we used to have these concept boards, because that's what we'd have to do. We'd go do the research. You've got the packaging, you've got the product, you're telling them what it delivers. And the best practice is actually, instead of you coming up with that language yourself, is actually sitting with the consumers in a room and saying, guys, here's the concept board. Normally what they do is they'd first talk about it without presenting a visual stimulus, which is the board, and then actually hearing unprompted answers in terms of, okay, when I'm saying this and that to you, what comes to your mind? And then now when they see it, and then once, they've seen it, you can then start asking those questions around, guys, if you were to meet this person, if Omo was a brand, if Five Roses was a brand, if Fresh Pack was a brand, if Lux was a brand, sorry, not a brand, a person.
Person, yes.
That's what I actually meant to say.
I'm with you.
Yes, if they were a person, who would this person be? What would they look like? And all of these things. And then, you get that. But also remember what I said about differentiation. So you're taking that consumer language, but also at the same time, you're trying to see in the category or in the competitive area that we're playing in, what are the other brands saying or doing? And what are the things that we can own as a brand, that we can use and say, this is what we do versus other brands. And then out of that, then, you start writing that language around, okay, this is the brand personality. And it's an important exercise because it starts driving how the brand shows up in different spaces. So if we're going to do a PR event, this is how we would show up. If we were to have a radio ad, this is how we would show up. If we were to launch a new product, these are the types of products we would launch. All of that stuff.
Has it ever happened where that, call it the core target audience for a brand, in reality isn't the audience that is consuming the brand? Where, for example, and this I think happened in the 90s in the hip hop space in America, where a lot of hip hoppers would always have I think it was a champagne brand called, what was that brand? I forget what it was, Cristal. And they would always be, popping bottles and spilling Cristal all over their videos. And it turns out that the manufacturers of that brand were like, we were never targeting the hip hop, category. This is supposed to be fine, fine dining kind of, vibe. How does a brand engage with its audience in that way, where we're targeting one group, but this brand is it's really, really making a big mark in another category?
Yeah, no, that happens a lot actually. And that's why sometimes, actually a lot of the time with brands, we will have what we call the core target market. So that's the people that the brand is intended for. But then also there's the secondary target market. So it's almost like there's a spillover effect into other people then consuming it. And both sets of people are important because sometimes the core people may be a small section, or in terms of number or size, they may not be big, but they are probably there for a reason, and that's there to reflect what the brand is about, especially from an aspiration point of view. And then what they then serve to do is to create almost this aspirational picture of the brand that then influences the secondary target market. And then you'll find that the secondary target market, there's a lot more of them. And they are also important because they probably, from a volume or buying point of view, they're probably buying the product a lot more. So sometimes, some people will say, oh, actually, let's reposition the brand to be in line with the secondary target market. But that's not always smart, because the secondary guys are actually influenced by the visuals, because they probably aspire to live that type of lifestyle, like in the example you just made now about the champagne. So if you're now taking the brand and you're presenting it to them at their level, then to them they're like, oh no, but I don't want to be this person actually. I don't want to be seen with this brand because it's not what I aspire to be. And sometimes in marketing, that's the other reality, that a lot of the products, especially when you're working with premium products, you almost have to present them or market them at a level that's a little bit higher from an income or lifestyle perspective versus the core users, or the users that buy or consume that product a lot. And that's just the reality. Sometimes you do have those brands where maybe volume is actually not a problem. With certain brands, it's brands where it's a very premium product. So it's not necessarily that a lot of people are going to be able to afford or buy it. And therefore, the people who are marketing or selling that brand, they actually don't have a problem with pitching it to a very, very niche group of people, because when they do the calculations, because of the pricing of the product, even if it's consumed by only 10,000 people, to them, as long as they're making their profit numbers or revenue targets, then it's enough for that product, to be viable. So it always depends. And again, there's also this continuous loop or feedback cycle of talking to your customers, observing them, the research. And for me, I take every marketing touch channel as a feedback point. So what are people saying on social media? What are they saying, on radio? What type of feedback are they giving to the call center? When we do research, what feedback are we getting there? And your job as a marketer is to take all of those data points and try and put a compelling story around that.
I think within that equation, you have the element of brand trust, where a brand has a promise. And in the boardrooms, in the marketing space, we hear this promise. We workshop the promise. When the consumer interacts with the brand, is the promise top of mind, or is it kind of woven into the experience that the consumer has? And what could be some of the challenges that a brand would experience in ensuring that it delivers on that promise?
I think it's both. Sometimes it's top of mind, depending on how good a job the brand team is doing of defining what that promise is. Because yes, you've built all the different characteristics around the brand, the personality and all these things, the messaging, the tagline and all of these things. So sometimes it's very clear, this brand is for this person, this is what they're promising, etc. And then sometimes it's then interwoven into the experience. And that's just the thing. We have to deliver on the promises, because that's why you got people to buy into the product. It's almost like it's a dating exercise. I'm the brand. I put myself out there. I approached you. I made you aware of me. And then, I asked you out on a date. You decided, okay, let me try this brand. And then now here, you've tried me. Now you're like, oh, okay, actually, let me get into a relationship with this brand. And yes, there is a trust contract or a promise that's made around there. And you also have to make sure that you're delivering, whether it's the product benefits, it's a soap, it can clear pimples, it can give you a lighter complexion, it can also make your skin glow. Is the product consistently delivering against that? And also there's the emotional broader need, which is for the consumer, I actually want to look beautiful. So is this product making me look beautiful, etc.? So like I said, sometimes it's very clear, and then sometimes it's implied. And we constantly, as the brand team, but also the team that's doing the manufacturing and the product development, be making sure that the product continues to deliver against that. And there are those teams behind the scenes that are continuously going out before each product, especially in the FMCG industry, before each product is sent out into the market. They'll always, have retention samples, and those samples get put in the quality labs, and there's people always testing that. So when we were working on bottled water, they would always take, samples all the time around, the products that were being sent out. And that was to make sure that whatever we've promised on the packaging, if we've claimed that this water can do this or has that benefit, number one, does it, live up to what's being claimed on the packaging? And then also from a history point of view, from a quality control point of view, are we meeting our own manufacturing standards? And then also, and I mean, there were instances where consumers would say, hey, I drank this bottled water on this day, it did this to me. So now we have to have history and a track record. So then we know, our first port of call was getting in touch with the consumer or customer, collecting the product. And then it's important to check the batch number, when was it manufactured? And then we can then compare what was in the market versus what we had in the quality lab in terms of a retention sample, and then be able to do those investigations. And then, yes, obviously, your first port of call, depending on what happened, is to apologize and keep your trust with the customer. And, if you don't have those processes in place, sometimes that's where things, can, veer off in terms of customers then feeling let down because you either were not responsive, and when you did respond, you didn't have the right processes at the back to actually do those checks, and then be able to give them that feedback and restore that faith or trust. And I think sometimes if you don't pay attention to those things, it can be the types of incidents that can, from a PR point of view, and you know this very well because you operate in that space, it can become a big PR nightmare or crisis that the brand is unable, to recover from. And it can destroy the value. And then that becomes not just a marketing problem, but a corporate reputation and a company problem.
Sure.
Yeah.
That it can be tough to kind of recover from.
Yes. Yeah.
I think built in that equation of trust is the question of, is it what the brand says and portrays in a pretty picture, in a print ad, in that promise, versus the consistency of it? I think sometimes as consumers, remembering that even as, communicators and marketers, we are still consumers. I'm buying something because I liked how it was marketed and advertised. And if I get it, whether it's delivered to me, whether it's a product that is consumed immediately, it doesn't look like the picture. Therefore, why bega ingafani nestombe? Like, we need to figure that out, And that consumer experience can be compromised by how well we visually capture a product versus when it's now in full production. Does it meet the quality standard of how it's been presented? How can a brand navigate that?
So with that, there's the discipline around different marketing channels playing different roles. So in the example that you've made, yes, there's the front-facing piece, which is the advertising. So, and there we don't necessarily have a lot of time to tell the brand story or the message or the product story. A lot of the time with TV and radio ads, you've got 30 seconds,
Yes.
and that's it.
Yeah.
And a lot of work goes around, the brand brief and then the creative brief and then the agency reverts, and then we're all agreeing around the script and
Yes.
the storyboard, and then now we're shooting, and then even after shooting, we're cutting, we're slicing, just so that we can get to the core essence in terms of what the story is we want to tell around the brand. So there's that, right? And that's normally where most of the money goes. But there's also the roles that the other channels have to play. So your packaging is probably your biggest marketing asset, because that's where the consumer goes to in terms of the product information. So now they're picking it up on the shelf, they're turning it around, they're reading it, especially the front, in terms of, the benefits and things like that. If it's a service, it's your leaflet, it's the experience with the product, etc. And then there's other channels, like for instance, your PR channel, where there now you can tell a broader story about the brand. It's that press release, it's the media choices or the media planning in terms of these are the channels that we will put this brand in. Then it then rolls over into the social media or the digital marketing space. So the website, it's almost like that's the home of the brand. So if people need additional information on the brand, that's where they're going to go and get it. And then is obviously the social media piece, where you need to have that engagement and that back and forth in terms of managing that community of people who've decided to follow you, because they have a choice. They could be following other brands and other pages, but they've decided that they want to be part of this community of people. And then there's obviously then CRM, where you could talk to people in terms of newsletters, SMSs, WhatsApp, different engagement things. Then there's also the brand experiences, etc. So in the example that you made about Valpre, the challenge we faced at that time when I was working on the brand was we were at a point where we had this great and well-known brand. I think Valpre was one of those brands that had first mover advantage in terms of the bottled water category. And it was, still is a spring water with a very unique and distinct taste. And people always laugh when I say, guys, just like you have wine and whiskey sommeliers, there's water sommelier. Yeah, those guys, yeah, they would tell you this water tastes like this,
Wow.
They would actually conduct water tasting.
Yes.
And what we needed to do was differentiate, because this product was priced at a certain price point versus other brands, which was premium. And therefore now people were starting to say, but South African tap water is so good, which it's a pity what's happening now, but in those days, very good. Why should I be buying bottled water? So now you're almost having to justify like a reason for this category or even this brand's existence in terms of why should the consumer buy it. And what was happening is we were having cheaper brands come in and saying, well, we are also spring water, and actually you don't have to pay as much, because it almost made it seem like this brand was all about fluff. And the story we got to tell in terms of after all the internal work we had done was we actually needed to anchor it on different points, right? And what was nice was that from a functional perspective in terms of the product itself, yes, it was a spring water. Yes, it also had a unique taste profile, and this is something we discovered around where the water was actually being extracted from, gave it that taste profile. And now when the water sommeliers or the guys were doing their things in the lab, it was, actually this type of water, that low mineral content is such that when you have it with a whiskey, it actually interferes the least with the taste of the whiskey. So now what are you doing? Whiskey consumption is a premium thing.
Experience,
exactly. Now you're linking something that the brand or product naturally has, and you are then able to associate it with this premium experience, right? So great tick. Okay, what do we need to do? We need to make sure we associate, because also there's marketing by association. We need to associate this water with these premium events or premium experiences. So therefore, what you said about how the brand shows up. So we're promising you a premium water. Where are you most likely going to find Valpre? In those premium spaces. What does that then say? Okay, it means then the premium spaces are restaurants, fine dining restaurants. What does this mean? When you're talking to the owners of those restaurants, they're like, guys, great, but your water is in a plastic bottle. Me, I'm a very premium restaurant.
Yes.
You guys don't have a glass bottle. So product manufacturing team, we need a glass bottle. So now you're saying, okay, now that's another tick to the premium part of it. Then at the same time, there's also this category perception around bottled water's impact on the environment. So now what we're trying to do is say, with a bottled water, where we actually, when we get the water, we don't do anything to it. And that's the truth. Nothing was really done to the water except to obviously, UV it so that it's, safe for human consumption. But also at the same time, you need to manage that perception around that environmental footprint. So at that time, we were lucky as a company that they tapped into this tech around the plastic or the resin of which the bottle was made of, which was made, from plant-based material. So now the decision was made as a business that this would be the first brand within the stable to use that resin. So therefore, we then said, okay, this is a plant bottle. And then it was like, okay, guys, if this is the direction we're going in, there's also around the thing around the carbon footprint. So from a manufacturing point of view, we need to make sure that when we are transporting this water up and down, that we're managing that, which was at that time the decision to move the plant to Heidelberg. And even in the way, I think the team did such a great job in terms of how that plant was actually built.
Yes.
It was in a sustainable way, right? So therefore, that was also another proof point, because you asked a question earlier around brand promise. And it's very important that the things that you are promising are defensible. So if customers were to say, actually, you guys are lying, you're not doing it this way, then you can say, hey, come to our side, see this, see that. And also, from a stakeholder perspective, some of the work I had to do around that time with my other colleagues, of course, was around building relationships with the South African National Bottled Water Association, but also the PET Recycling Company of South Africa, because we're saying we care about the environment, but are we actually playing an active role in PETCO, which is, that company? And therefore, that allowed us to then have almost like these proof points or little boxes where we could say, and at that time, we were saying for the brand, the vision was South Africa's premium bottled water that cares about the environment. So are we premium? Yes. Is our packaging premium? Tick. Glass bottle. Tick. We're in fine dining restaurants. Tick. You can put us with team premium experiences, whiskey, horse racing, those type of things. Then on the other side, do we care about the environment? Yes, we do. But also, is this a once-off thing? Is this a marketing,
Pain
yes,
versus philosophy.
exactly. So now it's like this is the path we need to stay on as the brand for at least the next 2 to 5 years. And then that also helped for us to be able to tell the agency partners. And it's good to have agency partners that then can challenge you around the story. You can then brief the agency partners better to then come up with the right TV ads that then, not just TV ads, but the communication campaigns that then can tell the story. So that came with, the TV, the print, etc. And like I said, each channel played a different role. So when we were talking about the premium association, we were using different marketing vehicles so that were the experiences, the events. When we were talking about the brand promise and things like that, that was the above the line media. When we were talking about the environmental aspect of Valpre, then it became around the PR. And that's where now we were telling those stories, but we were also actively involved in these other partnerships that we had created. So you then create this ecosystem around the story that you tell around the brand, but each box has a different role to play.
Earlier on, you had alluded to, the role that a new brand manager might want to play in putting their, imprint on a brand in terms of, evolving and, changing designs, packaging, or whatever that might be. The truth, I think, is that we live in an environment that is consistently changing. So things change, trends change, technology changes. So at some point, there may justifiably need to be a conversation about, is the brand ready to evolve? And if so, in what way? You've spoken a lot about the research that goes into what those decisions might be to motivate for any number of modifications or adaptations to a product based on consumer insights. In your experience, has there been a moment where what you as the brand team might want for a brand has potentially differed from what the consumer is telling you they want? And how have you then responded or pivoted to say, yes, this is our vision for the brand, but our consumers are telling us something different. They want this. They want another experience or another adaptation that we may not have on our books at the moment. How do you manage that, and how do you pivot?
I mean, that has definitely happened in my experience. There's times where we've gotten things right, and there's times when we've gotten things wrong, where you think this is what the consumer wants, you put it out, and then they reject it. And sometimes it's loud, and then sometimes it's not. And I think the best thing to do is to recognize the mistake and correct it as quickly as possible. And also, I think it's okay for brands and companies to say, actually, we were wrong. We apologize. We've heard you. We're going to go in a different direction. And I think that then lends brands to being credible, but also vulnerable. And I think in the realm of psychology, where brands are seen as people, I think that almost like humanizes the brand, and it brings some type of humility to it. Instead of it being, okay, it's owned by this corporate company, and they're just, about making money. They don't care about us, that type of thing. So I think in those instances where, brands do that, and I remember a time where we had to do that. It was actually with a service where we did something and there was a lot of resistance, and we pedaled back, and we sat around the room and we said, okay, actually that decision was probably not the right one. Let's actually go back and let's do this, and let's actually apologize. And then sometimes that also what drives a lot of maybe product recalls, or sometimes you'll see in the FMCG space, there's a new flavor or variant. It didn't take off, and you'll then see it quietly go out of go out of distribution. So that does happen. I think for me, it's also good to realize that sometimes forecasts and projections, when you put them in the real in the real world or in a real life market scenario, sometimes things don't go well. And let's regroup. Let's change tact, but let's communicate. Take people on the journey with you. Communicate with your customers. Correct the mistake, and then get back on the bandwagon
and keep it moving.
Yes. Yeah.
Linda, you are in a space where there's a lot of new talent that will consistently enter the market. Youthful, fresh, exciting ideas that need to be married with the wisdom of many years in a campaign, mistakes made, lessons learned. How would you encourage the next generation of brand custodians or stewards who are maybe under 5 years into the market at this point, but who have the potential to really make a positive impact within the branding space across a variety of different sectors? What have you learned that you can sow back into them?
I think for me, what has helped me is the training that I've gotten, whether it's on the job, whether it's educational training. And I've been fortunate enough in that I also worked for companies that believed in upskilling their marketing teams continuously. And the rate at which the marketing world is changing now, and it's all based on, what's happening in the digital space. It's changing at such a
Fast pace.
yeah, it's very, 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 very rapid. So for me, myself, in as much as I can say I've got 2 decades worth of experience, I've also had to recognize that to keep myself current, I also need to continuously be investing in myself and my knowledge and, doing those courses here and there, but also getting that real life experience around dealing with what's happening in the world of marketing. And also, involving myself in industry work. I do judging every now and again for the mobile marketing awards.
Awesome.
And for me, especially as a traditional marketer, it's really, really helped me stay current because there we get exposed to what the brands are putting out. And also, a lot of it obviously is mobile marketing, and even that is growing each year. There's new categories that are coming in, and I feel that organization does a lot of work in terms of the due diligence around the entries. Yes, we are judging the different entries, but there's actually a lot of debates. There's a lot of meetings that we have, and the brands and the agencies get to come and present, and we get to ask them questions
And defend their work.
exactly. And that in itself, for me, has been a great learning experience, and it's helped me to stay current. Also, what you said, that you asked a question around, does your brain ever switch off? As a marketer, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Even if you're not working on a brand at a specific point in time, there's always so much to learn, whether you're watching TV, you're driving somewhere, you're attending a certain event, because you're like, okay, wow, I'm at this activation. Oh, it's so interesting that they did this and they did that. And then those are learnings that you can then take, into your own space when you're doing your own work. And then to the youngsters, I would say, take the time, because sometimes we want to go places and we want to get there fast. And sometimes we're like, when it might have taken you 20 years to get there. I don't have 20 years. I want to get there in 5. I want to get there in 10. That's fine. And I think that's also fair, because the world is changing at a much more rapid pace than when it was, 20 years ago. However, I think the guys or the people that you found there, they still have a lot of institutional knowledge. And that's the thing. Sometimes I worry that we are losing the institutional knowledge. And I'm not saying let's have processes for the sake of having processes. Let's create bureaucracies. Let's make things go slow for the sake of it. No. What I'm referring to is where people have done things, they have experience in certain things. There's actually a lot to learn from those people. And a lot of us, to my earlier point, benefited from those, the OGs of that time, who were able to have the patience to teach us, and also sometimes when there isn't processes, that's where you then have the crisis, or the crises, sorry, that then come through, because the right processes are not in place. And also, you may be young today, you may be wanting to be a marketing director in 5 or 10 years, but also remember, yes, you may be looking up to someone. There are people looking up to you. And when you are that marketing director one day, you have to teach those people. So we can't afford to have a situation where we are losing the institutional knowledge and then we're diluting the quality of what's coming through. So that's important. And also take time to continuously hone your craft and hone your skill set as well.
We are embracing AI and that technology a lot more in the sector. Where do you think there's still a need for the human element when it comes to brand custodianship?
I think in terms of AI, there's a lot of positives. Just in terms of efficiency, so speed or pace at which you can get work out. Also, capacity, a lot of, people or individuals within the marketing and advertising space. Sometimes you've got so many clients or so many projects to work on, and the workload, especially now with work-life balance becoming an important thing, AI can help you overcome that. I do think, though, that sometimes with AI, because it's only as good as what you put in, right? And remember, you're not the only one putting stuff in there. So all of us are putting stuff in there. So then it can generate a sea of sameness, because it's working on specific algorithms, to generate images or whatever it is that's generating. And I was actually reading a post yesterday where someone was saying, it's too much. The posters are all starting to look the same.
So that.
Yeah, yeah. But also back to, it's only as good as what you put in. It's also important to prompt it properly because it's also learning, right? Yeah. So it's learning and it's refining or
Adapting with every instruction.
Yes. So you are the owner of the company, or you're the marketing person in that company, or you're stewarding or managing that brand. You know the tone of the brand. You know its corporate identity or colors. You know its personality. You know how it shows up. So it's important to prompt AI in the right way. And I think sometimes people are too caught up in the speed of AI versus actually, especially in marketing, distinctiveness, differentiation, having a differentiated positioning. Those things are important. So you need to make sure that even with what you're generating within the AI, that it lives up to those brand values or brand iconography that you've put in place, so that people are experiencing the brand in the same way. And then also, I think there's still a lot to be said or risen for existence for graphic designers. We still need them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, those guys, they are the guys who can, create the work that perhaps needs more time, more thinking. But also, there's still a role for them to play with the AI, where they can either, take what the AI has done and put it in the right format for the brand. And also what we don't want is the clutter, the visual clutter, where everything's just looking the same. I mean, the other day, I was watching an advert. I was watching TV with my cousin, and we just saw this ad where everyone in the stadium had the same face. And then the ad flashed, and then we looked at each other and we're like, sure, that was AI, right? So, but you get it. You understand that perhaps there was a budget problem.
Sure.
Perhaps they don't own the rights to, the FIFA World
There's
Cup.
a time crunch, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah. But also now it's like, how? No. Yeah, no. And that's where the human element or interface or in the intervention is still needed, that quality control, but also the refinement to making sure that it actually is in line with what the brand wants. And I think there's also varying levels of AI products. Some can do this, some can do that. And, as you, explore that space, you also see which ones are the good tools and which ones are perhaps not right for you at that point in time.
Linda, this brings us to the end of our conversation. I feel like we could take different campaigns and different, products and unpack them,
Yeah.
because I'm really enjoying the insights that you bring to the conversation. In closing off, is there anything I might not have asked you that you have on your heart to share?
I think we've covered a lot. Like you say, we could probably go on and on. I think the one thing I'll say when people ask me, but why did you do marketing, right? For me, it has to do with curiosity. And I think even in what you asked me about what young people should do, keep a curious mindset. There's lots to learn every day, all the time. And then also the thing that has kept me in the industry is no 2 days are the same. Today you're doing this, tomorrow you're doing something else. Even where we find ourselves, me and you today. I mean, we met more than 15 years ago.
Yes.
Who would have said that you would be on this journey?
Yes.
I would also be on it.
A similar journey.
And, the conversation we had earlier around what we are learning around, being in this space,
Yes.
and how this channel or medium is also growing. And again, that speaks to both of us being open to saying, okay, we're not going to treat ourselves as the OGs that know everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Tina, we're only going to do PR and print and traditional stuff. You actually have to be open in terms of how the world is changing.
Yes.
And making sure that you are upskilling yourself and exposing yourself, because it's an adapt or die type of industry or career that we've chosen. But for me, it's what makes it exciting, and it's what keeps me stimulated. Yeah.
I think one of the things we forget about our brains is how powerful they are, and that our neurons can learn so much more than we give them the capacity to. So the minute we shift our focus on something new and look to acquire more knowledge and information, our brain automatically goes into a mode that supports it. And the more we learn, the more we stimulate those neurons, the more we have the capacity to learn. So being able to shift, to pivot, to turn around and say, let me do something new, let me dive into something that is previously unexplored, by me, allows you to keep your brain agile. They say that something as simple as brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand stimulates the neurons in your brain and, keeps you as active and as alive as a child who is, absorbing everything around them and learning for the first time. And I think regardless of where we might be in the stages of our careers in the sector, there's more to learn all the time. So that passion and that, what was it that Steve Jobs said? Stay hungry, stay foolish. And there's a concept of failing fast, that the quicker you get to the point of failure is the quicker you get to the lesson to be learned on that topic and you can move on. So all of those things, I think, kind of come into play in the work that we do, but also leave us at this point in the conversation that says there's so much more to learn for all of us. And I'm thankful for having shared the last hour or so with you, for you having given so much of your knowledge and experience and time and value to the conversation. I'm confident that it'll translate into a really insightful view and listen for all of those who are listening to DeepBrief. Thank you for taking the time, for staying with us. Please remember to go through to Minding Her Business and have a look at the conversations that Linda is having with female entrepreneurs around the country. It really is insightful. It really is impactful and inspiring to see the work that women are doing in a variety of businesses. Thank you for your time, Linda. I hope you will consider DeepBrief a place that you'd want to come back to for more conversations. You are always welcome, and we consider you family here.
I'll be back. Thank you so much for having.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that you will tune in for our next episode. I'm at the point where I'm pushing subscriptions, so please subscribe, like, share, tell a friend, comment, leave a comment below. And for all of those who are looking to have a client, a boss, a colleague on the show, please feel free to email deepbrief@kotalani.net. We'd welcome you on the show. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you in our next episode.